This episode of DDO Players News is brought to you by the Easy Roller Dice Company. Check out EasyRollerDice.com for all of your dice needs. Metal dice, regular dice, specialty dice, any dice in between. You can find them at Easy Roller Dice. Don't forget about their full line of dice bags and roller dice trays as well. EasyRollerDice.com for all of your game-playing dice needs. Once again, thank you to Easy Roller Dice for sponsoring this episode of DDO Players News. Hey now, everybody. It's Drac from DDO Players. I am privileged to be sitting here talking to one of my friends, and actually, little known fact that unless you listen to Lotro Players, you probably did not know, I started podcasting with him. We have with us Braxwolf.
Oh, hello. Hey, Drac. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going today? And thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's going pretty good. You're bringing back all these memories. Lotro Players News was my first podcast, too. So I think you and I started on that almost the exact same time, if I remember right. I might have been 1 or 2 episodes before you.
I think you were like 2 episodes before me, actually.
It was really close, yeah.
It was, yeah. You were, but yeah, so it's great. Let's, besides Lotro Players, we'll probably get into that in this. Why don't you just share with our listeners kind of your history in gaming, because I know you have quite the checkered past, we'll say, with gaming.
Yeah, it's not probably very typical for a lot of people who play MMOs. Of course, started out, I guess I'm kind of considered an old guy at this point when it comes to gaming. Started out way back on the Atari 2600, which was, that was it for me. That was the thing that I wanted to do every day.
Me too.
And
me too.
We're talking about games like, I had Pac-Man on the Atari, which was different than Pac-Man in the arcade. Just different enough, I guess. There was, all of the Star Wars games. Star Wars the arcade game was my favorite. I had Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. You could talk about things like Pong. We had the paddles. All those things. You could spend hours on those little dots and pixels, and it's unbelievable how far we've come when you think of those
right,
days.
Exactly. Yep. Oh yeah.
The first console that I ever purchased myself was the original Nintendo, the NES, what they call it now. Back then we just called it Nintendo because it was the only console they had. And I saved up, I think it was $99 is how much the original Nintendo Entertainment System was. I saved that up for a friend who was on vacation for a couple weeks. So that was my exact paycheck, was like $100 for those 2 weeks, coming over, watering the plants, feeding the cats and all that stuff. And I rode my bike over there every day to do that so that I could eventually buy a Nintendo. And of course, I got into all the regular popular games at the time. I guess Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was a great one.
Oh yeah.
A lot of single player stuff, honestly. I think the very first game I had was like a sniper game, and I don't remember what it was called now. A lot of sports games, like I said. Tecmo Football was one of my favorites. SNK used to make a game called Baseball Stars, which was one of the first games that would save progress because there was actually a memory chip on the cartridge. Usually, when you pop those cartridges out, you have to start the game over the next time. That's the way those games were made. Nintendo, that was the next thing. Although I did not, this is going to be where I kind of deviate from a lot of people who are playing MMOs now. I didn't get into a lot of the RPG type stuff. I never played a Zelda game. I didn't get into the fantasy stuff so much. I was kind of more on the sports side of things. I really liked sports, and consoles have always done a pretty good job with those types of games. Trying to remember what came next. My brother bought a Sega Genesis. I didn't play that very much. My dad bought an Apple IIc computer for the family, and that is where I started my PC gaming, I think you could say. It was like Chop, and I did have a couple fantasy games. Castle Wolfenstein, the original one, the little 2D one. The one where you walked around with the brick walls. It was like 2D, you actually had to use the entire keyboard. One half of the keyboard to point your gun in a certain direction, and the other half of the keyboard was to walk in a certain direction. So you had to be really dexterous.
Yeah, I remember those controls sucked so bad.
There was no mouse. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I mean, Apple is known for the mouse because that's the Macintosh came out with that. But with the Apple IIc, there was no mouse. Everything was keyboard. Then we eventually got a 2GS, which was very similar, except it was in color. Um, we're talking about my first PC experience was monochrome green screen. It was not anything extravagant. And of course, we kind of move into like the era of me having kids and not playing video games as much. And then I kind of picked it back up with the PC gaming right around 2012, I think, when I discovered the web series The Guild with Felicia Day, who I know you are familiar with.
You can say that, yes.
And it kind of blew my mind because I had dabbled a little bit with like one-on-one experience was like Doom 2, where I would call a friend at college. We would have our modems call each other and we could play against one another. That was my very first kind of online experience. It was just two people and him, and we do either a death match or something like that in Doom 2. And you had to like get into DOS commands to actually connect your computers up together. So to see what type of game that they had based the web series The Guild around, I had never really gotten into that. I had missed World of Warcraft, I had missed EverQuest, I had missed all those things because I was kind of graduating from college and getting my first job and getting married and having kids, and so all of that stuff had kind of passed me by. So
Right.
when I kind of started to look at how far video gaming had come, decided to go look into it and see what was available. And I ran into EverQuest 2 was available. I think I looked at World of Warcraft, and the one that really caught my attention though was Lord of the Rings Online, because one thing, it had just gone free to play, and I wasn't really sure if this was something I wanted to get into financially, because back in my day, I would buy a video game and I would have the video game and I never had to buy it again, right?
Right.
That was kind of my mindset.
Yep. Oh yeah. No.
So I had never really gotten into the mindset of paying monthly to play a game like World of Warcraft, where subscription was required. So I didn't know if I wanted to get into that or not. Since Lotro was free to play, there was really no risk for me. The other thing is obviously Lord of the Rings Online. The movies had already come out. They were amazing. I'd read the books a couple times. The Hobbit is my favorite book to this day. So anything that adheres to that lore was really, could jump in and already kind of know what was going on. I didn't have to start from scratch. So that was where I kind of got into MMO gaming, was right around 2012, and got into it enough that I got into content creation around it, and that's where you and I met.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and that's where you started on the Lotro Players News podcast, and then, like I said, I started. I'm pretty sure it was like 2 episodes. You were on a little bit before me, and we did that for a long time together.
We did. I don't think I made it to. Can't remember. I'm not sure if I made it exactly to 100 episodes, or if it was just short of that I stopped being a regular. It seemed like I came back for episode 100 and it hadn't been very long since I left.
Yeah, that kind of sounds familiar. That's a long time ago, though.
Yeah.
It was a really long time ago, but yeah.
And I really think, this is absolutely, nothing about the current cast. In fact, I haven't listened to the show in a while since I stopped playing Lotro, but man, that original Lotro Players newscast was special because we didn't really know what we were or weren't supposed to do, and so we were just kind of making it up as we went along, and there were no rules, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a bunch of people that enjoyed each other and enjoyed the game, and it was different every week.
It was. No, I agree. It was. Yeah, that was like I said, that's what got me into podcasting, and look, and you as well. Speaking of podcast, you have your own podcast, which is amazing, by the way.
Well, thanks. I'd say maybe the new incarnation of it, maybe.
If people aren't listening, what is wrong with you? You need to do that. It's called Beyond Boss Fights. You want to just kind of talk a little bit about that, how it came about, and kind of how it's changed? Because like you said, there's like Beyond Boss Fights 2.0, we'll say.
Yeah. So Beyond Boss Fights was my first attempt at trying to, I don't know, the theme of my content creation is dabbling, because I like to learn how to do something. And so being on Lotro Players News for a while was great. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. But I wanted to kind of see if I could do my own thing. And so one day I had a little bit too much time on my hands, and I decided I was just going to come up with my own podcast. And the format of it was going to be, general gaming, but I was going to interview different people from the gaming community once a month, because I didn't think I could do it weekly, and I was absolutely right. In fact, once a month was somewhat of a challenge sometimes. So I did that. I jumped. My very first episode was with Andang. Was kind of my safe zone because Andang, as you know, anybody who's listened or been in the Lotro community for any length of time knows, he started the Players Alliance. He started Lotro Players News, and so we were very familiar with one another. He was my very first episode, and then from then on, I invited people I knew from Twitter or people who I knew from blogging or from other content creation, podcasting, one a week or one a month, and we would have a certain topic that we would cover as I interviewed them. So I still think it was a great concept, and I liked how many of those episodes turned out. I'm on episode 9. I actually interviewed on Twitter. You'll know him as DJ Pimp Daddy. His name is Andrew, and we actually hit it off really well. I felt so good about that episode that later on down the line, when I decided to change the format of the show, I invited him to be the permanent co-host with me. And so to this day, DJ Pimp Daddy is my co-host on Beyond Boss Fights. The problem with Beyond Boss Fights is I did it for about a year. And like I said, it got to be very difficult. Interview podcasts are very time consuming because, you know, Drac, you not only have to line up the guests, you have to figure out what the topic's going to be. You have to sometimes contend with time zones because this is a global thing. This isn't just somebody, down the road. You have to come up with the questions, and you have to first of all have enough in the question department that you're going to fill your time slot. And because that was important to me, I wanted to at least give people an hour's worth of content every time. I know podcasts are pretty squishy on their time frames nowadays, but at that time that was important to me. I also wanted to be able to diverge into other topics that we would organically get into along the way. So it's actually there's a lot of effort that goes into an interview podcast. That's not even counting all the editing and stuff that you have to do afterwards. I did a lot of editing on those early shows. I did a lot of cutting out spaces between words and people saying and I don't do that anymore. but in the early days,
I'm guilty as charged of that as well.
I was very, very particular about that. So that in and of itself, for an hour episode, you could find yourself editing for at least an hour, sometimes.
Oh, easily, yeah. Oh, easily.
So that happened for about a year, and then I did a couple more episodes, and then kind of faded off a little bit. Part of it was because it was just too time consuming. The other part of it was, well, this is actually a financial thing for me, right? I'm paying to put this content out there because I'm paying for hosting and all this other stuff. Well, fast forward a little bit, and itch comes back, as you know. If you haven't done something for a while that you enjoyed, eventually the itch will come back. And I was kind of entering with DJ a little bit because he was a fan of the show. He wanted to see it come back. And he said, well, if you didn't have to pay for somebody to host your podcast, would you start it up again? And I said, that's a really intriguing question because I might actually do that. Part of the problem is when you're paying monthly for a podcast host, you kind of feel like you got to be using that. If you have a rough time and you have to skip a couple months, you feel like you're paying for nothing, right?
Right,
because
exactly.
You're not putting any new content out.
But like, why am I paying for this if I'm not putting anything out? Right.
If it's free though, and it's just always going to be there, and I can just do an episode whenever I feel like it, that kind of frees you up a lot. So eventually I said, that's really something that I think I want to try and do, but I'm not going to do the interview thing again because it's just too much. I just want to turn on the microphone and talk about whatever we're into at this point. And I asked him if he would be my co-host for that. And remember if he jumped at the opportunity, but he did say yes eventually, and off we go. So now it's just kind of more of a regular, it's the one that you see more often now when two celebrities or whatever just jump on and start talking about a couple topics that they're interested in. That's kind of the route we've gone, and it's not necessarily every month. It's maybe a couple times a quarter or whatever, but it's a lot more relaxed for us. I'm not nearly as anal about the way I edit the show. I usually just pull the audio right off of the video. I put the video on YouTube now, so people can actually see our faces, which for years I don't think people didn't know what I looked like. So it was kind of a big deal the first time we did that. And that's kind of where the show sits right now. We do one when we can. We enjoy doing it, and we're still getting pretty good feedback.
And how can people find Beyond Boss Fights?
Excellent question, Draculetta. So I still have a blog that I don't write at very often, but it's at braxwolf.wordpress.com. And on the top, there's a tab for the Beyond Boss Fights podcast, and you can subscribe that way. There's also on the front page, there's different ways you can subscribe to the show, but it's just all the regular stuff. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on whatever the Google one is now. Used to be Google Play Music, but I understand they're moving all their stuff to YouTube Music. But
yeah, I got an email and it didn't make sense. I got to look at that and see if there's anything I need to do about it on this podcast. But I was like, okay, whatever, Google.
Just anywhere you'd expect to see it. And if it's on, usually if they're on iTunes, they show up in other things like Pocket Casts and those.
Right. Android yeah. You should be able to find it. Just look for Beyond Boss Fights and you'll be able to find that. But as I said, it really is an excellent podcast. And I kind of like it better now without the interview. Not saying the interview version of the show was bad, but it's just great now because you never know what you're going to get. And you guys it's kind of like you said, it's just two people get together, talking, and you just have a conversation, and it's great to see where that goes. And sometimes you just get on these topics, and it's just amazing. It's a great listen.
Thanks. And really, interviewing is just a skill, and I'm not sure that it's one that I really practice very well. It never know what you're going to get when you bring a different person on the podcast every month. Maybe it's somebody that you're going to really hit it off with, and maybe it's going to be a real struggle to get through the show. You just never know.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's kind of nice to have that predictability of a constant guest host now, or a co-host.
So another facet of your, we'll say, gaming life is you are actually a writer now for Massively Overpowered.
Yes.
How in the world did that come about?
Well, I like to dabble, Drac.
Well, I think we've established that at this point. You just dabble in things and just things happen for you. So, okay.
Yeah. So blogging was one other thing that I kind of got into. As I mentioned before, I do have a blog that's still up. Probably right around 2014 is maybe when I spun my blog up. It was another aspect of content creation. I had been writing for Lotro Players News for a couple of years. I wanted to give myself a space to write about other things,
right.
Other games, music, really anything. It started out being all games, but it's been kind of taken off in different directions as the years have gone by. So writing is fun for me. I mean, it's something that I enjoy doing. Sometimes it's kind of a therapeutic thing too. It's if I have something to rant about, it's much easier for me to sit down and kind of organize that type of complaint into written form rather than just blasting off a tweet or even going off on a podcast without thinking about it too much. So the written word to me is a very powerful thing, and it's something that's important that I continue to do, or at least continue to have that type of outlet. So I spun this blog up to do just that, and I got involved with kind of the gaming blogging community back in those years. And in 2014, 2015 was actually pretty prolific on the blogging front. Did a lot of things, collaborated with a lot of people. Roger Edwards from Contains Moderate Peril is someone who I would kind of throw out there as been a podcasting and blogging mentor for me. It's always been kind of something I aspired to, I don't know what the right word is, kind of be thought of along with some of these other big names in the blogging sphere. And of course, as I was doing that, I was also paying attention to some of the professional sites like Massively OP and MMORPG.com and things like that. And so as I was kind of continuing to get better and better at blogging, I just made a lot of friends. They just kind of, that's what happens when you get into something like that. You start to meet people, you start to share ideas, and you start to kind of gravitate towards people of similar mindsets. And so I got to make a lot of cool friends within the blogging community and within the gaming world at that time. It eventually turned into a podcast network. It eventually turned into just kind of having a bunch of friends on Twitter that could banter back and forth. And as you mentioned, it eventually turned into a job opportunity.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, actually, it's just been a little bit over a year ago. I was sitting at home working from home, which I do occasionally. I do a lot more now, but at the time I was
Well,
doing it
naturally, yeah.
occasionally. Yeah, COVID has forced us all
Exactly.
indoors.
Exactly. Everybody
Um,
works from home now. But
that's
yeah.
right. Um, so and I happened to pick up my phone in the sometimes I'll take a break between tasks at work and I'll just scroll through Twitter really quick. And I did that and I saw a tweet from Massively Overpowered. It said they were hiring and it had a link on it. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't ever remember them advertising that they were hiring writers before. I knew they did hire people from time to time, but I thought it was kind of more of a pointed thing. It was so I clicked on the link to see what it was, and they had job descriptions for about 6 or 7 different positions, and I thought, my gosh, this is really an expansion here. And I read through them, and a lot of them are, like I said, I don't have a strong MMO background. I'm not MMO crazy like a lot of our columnists and readers at Massively OP. I kind of will jump from MMO to MMO and get really deep into one and then maybe pull out and get into another one. I don't sample all of them like a lot of people do. There was one job listing that was looking for an Elder Scrolls Online columnist to write something once a month or twice a month. And I looked at that and I thought, hey, I'm playing Elder Scrolls Online right now. I feel like I know enough to write about it. I've written stuff about video games in the past. I actually have a body of work. You know how they always talk about putting together a portfolio? I had one. It was my blog from 2014. Yeah. I know this site, and I look up to the people who write for this site. I mean, you're talking about Elliot Lefebvre, you're talking about Bree Royce and Justin Olivetti. These are like the real MMO writers. These are the people that are completely prolific and extremely skilled at what they do. So, just the fact that those were the people that might be looking at my application made me think, I'm going to try this. I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to, again, dabble in something a little bit new.
Why not? Let's try this, right?
That one position, it almost was like it was written for me. And how often do you do that? How often do you see that when you're looking at job postings, right? Most of the time it's like there's this enormous list of qualifications that you might hit 2 or 3 of. Right. And then you're like, I don't know about this. This one, it was like they wrote this for me almost. So I did. I went ahead and applied and was extremely excited. One of the most exciting days 2019 for me was when I got email from Bree saying, welcome to Massively Overpowered. And I went, oh yes, this is awesome. Really, it's been a great experience. I still wouldn't count myself in with the names that I mentioned previously, and even the newer columnists are very, very good. And they're crazy about MMOs. There's this Carlo. I don't know if you've ever read Carlo's column. He's our Black Desert Online. Yep. The kid, I call him a kid because he's young to me. The kid is just so sharp, and he just plays so many different, he plays a lot of BDO, but he plays so many different games that I've never even heard of. And it's fun to be kind of in that Slack chat and seeing those people go back and forth who just are passionate about this space.
So what is your typical, I guess for lack of a better word, day look like? Like, how do you get an assignment, for lack of a better term, on something you're going to write with, or can you just write like whatever you want about ESO, or do you have like an assignment that you have to do? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. At Massively OP, we are given a lot of latitude, and I think that makes the site better, because we're not usually handed a piece of paper with a list that says, here, you need to write about these things. It's like, okay, you're playing this game, so write a column about this game and submit it.
Okay.
Every once in a while, I mean, my very first one actually was probably my most creative one to this point. I did a pretend interview with one of the NPCs for ESO. I kind of was like, I want to start this way because I don't want to start with a controversial column. I know a lot of people are good at that. That's not one of my strengths. But I want to start with something that's kind of a little bit fluffy, a little bit fun. So I made up this interview between me and his name is Abner Tharn. You might remember him from the original story. And his he's a fun character because he's like pompous. You know,
Very much so. Yes.
he's a good guy, but he's super condescending. And for me, being a brand new columnist, I could play the part of being a brand new columnist who didn't know what I was talking about, interviewing a pompous jerk who could be condescending to me at the same time. You know, so
Right.
that was kind of a fun way to tackle my first column. But I wasn't sure if that was what she was looking for when she hired me. So I messaged her. I said, I've got this weird idea for my first column. He was like, yeah, go for it. I think you could pull this off. So yeah, I mean, we get a lot of latitude. I think, in fact, I've written about some other games besides ESO just because I'm like, at this point, there's not a lot going on in ESO and I haven't played it very hard for a couple weeks. So could I write this instead? And could we fit it somewhere else? And she'd be like, I've never been turned down yet. Let's just put it that way.
Awesome. Yeah.
Sometimes they'll have suggestions as to, well, maybe you could take this angle and it would be a little bit more relevant to what we usually post or something like that. But
Okay.
I've never been turned down. So like I said, I think that really shows in the columns that come out, because Bree knows that if you're playing a game and you're passionate about a game, you're going to write better about that game. Your column is going to be better. Instead, if you're assigned something that you're kind of like, yeah, it's not going to be very compelling to read.
And I know, speaking of ESO, since you are the ESO columnist, you got to go to the, I'm not exactly sure what they call that, launch announcement party. I don't know what the exact words were for ESO Greymoor. What was that like?
It was a lot of fun. I think they called it the Dark Heart of Skyrim reveal.
There you go. Yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't an announcement. It was a reveal. That's it.
Right. I mean, and it was. I think it was especially special for me because I went out there and I kind of have a foot in both sides of things. I have a foot in the journalism side, so I know some of the people that were out there. I met some people from PC Gamer and MMORPG.com. I knew Joseph. He was there. I never met him in person before. He's actually on Beyond Boss Fights at one time. I forget who. There was like 3 or 4 of us from like bigger name magazines, and then there was a few from like local Las Vegas sites that were just kicking off that DOS invited. But I also have a foot in the kind of the ESO community, kind of the player side of things, because I actually do play the game quite a bit, and so I've gotten into some of these builds and stuff that have a lot of these content creators for the community and just players for the community and fans of the game. And so I kind of was a little bit in both. And to be honest, they're 2 different crowds. They're 2 different groups. One of them is they're do a job and they're good at their job and they're gamers still. They usually are very much all over the place as far as what they play. Whereas, the ESO player base and fans are just really into the Elder Scrolls. And so it was kind of neat to kind of shift between the 2 groups while I was out there and get to know the people that I had interacted with on both sides a little bit more and kind of see how ZeniMax interacted differently with both crowds as well, because there's definitely a different way of what's the word, kind of interacting with the press than there is with player base, right?
Yep. Oh no, definitely.
Actually 2 different paths within the company. Interacting with the press always goes through public relations, whereas interacting with the player base usually goes through your community manager, right? Yep. So it was kind of fun to see how that all worked together, and I had a good time with both, honestly. For the press, they had a special section kind of up in the balcony that was front and center in front of the stage, which was nice. I didn't have to wait in line, which was
bonus. Was
nice. Yeah. They were like, press, okay, you got your press wristband, and they're like, here's your tables up here. So that was kind of cool. At the same time, when all the press event stuff was done, I got to break off and go back to hang out with the players I knew from being in guilds and stuff, and even interact with some of the ZeniMax employees who were mingling with the player base for a longer period of time after the event was over, going out to bars and stuff. So It was fun. It was a really, really fun event. I'm not the kind of person who travels for those things very often. I have never really been to a convention. Living in the Midwest, that's kind of a challenge because most of the conventions are on one coast or the other. And since I've got a family, I don't usually take 3 or 4 days out of my week to go do something like that. So this was an opportunity that I really couldn't pass up. And I think if I did it once a year, that would be good.
Right.
If I did it, once a month, that would be a bit much. But doing it once a year is probably the frequency I could handle something like that.
So Greymoor, which is the new expansion pack for ESO, is going to come out on May 26th. What can you tell us about it since you got the inside scoop?
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of secrets about it now, but
Yeah.
it was pretty cool to have. I did get an early preview of one of the early builds before it hit PTS, which was pretty fun. I haven't been on PTS since it released there, but I felt like I got a good enough feel. It really is almost exactly how they described it at the reveal. It's Skyrim, but it's also not Skyrim. It's Skyrim, but 200, 300 years before, the events of the Elder Scrolls 5, which everybody is so familiar with. So you've got a lot of places that you will recognize, but there's also a lot of stuff that's quite a bit different. I know the Blackreach caverns are much, much more expanded than what they are in Elder Scrolls 5. That's a big part. They said like 40% of the landmass is within the Blackreach caverns underground. Is pretty impressive. So in order to make that work, they actually have, I think in Skyrim there's only one way to get there. In ESO there's like 2 or 3 elevators that you can find on the landscape above ground to get you to Blackreach, and then there's like a secret cave entrance too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can discover, get into and out of Blackreach. Solitude is a big deal. I mean, I went to Solitude first thing to look at, and it looks very, very familiar, yet in some ways not quite as run down and dingy as the Solitude in Skyrim. So it feels a little bit newer, a little bit fresher, which it should be 200 years earlier. Bard's College is there, which is kind of an iconic location.
Definitely.
They have this new system called Antiquities, which I think is going to be something I spend a lot of time in. It's a non-combat system.
Me too. I am so excited for that.
It's a little bit more RPG-ish, right? It's not so much MMO-ish. It's a little bit more heavy on the RPG side because it's not combat related. It's kind of like an Indiana Jones thing. You're excavating old relics from the early eras of the Elder Scrolls, and there's clues as to where on the map to look for them, and then there's different ways you can try to excavate those relics out of the ground. So once you find them, and each one of those gives you some kind of reward, like either a cosmetic reward or a piece of legendary gear, or even I think they said there's going to be clues to other antiquity locations in some of those. So I think you could spend a lot of time really just going all over the existing world of Tamriel that they've built looking for these things. And it's, like I said in one of my columns, it's kind of like the fishing system, but a lot more interesting than the fishing system. It's more than just standing there with a pole and hitting, pull up the fish, pull up the fish, pull up the fish. It's actually getting out there and searching for stuff.
Well, yeah, because you can think of yourself, you're an archaeologist and you're digging for history and the thrill of the hunt, as it were. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Right. It's a little more laid back than let's go do a dungeon with, a bunch of other people. I would probably be remiss on this show if I didn't mention also the new vampire line that they're doing. Now they've had vampires in Elder Scrolls Online, I think since the beginning, but they only had a couple active skills. They had a lot of passive skills. The way they describe it is there's really only one passive skill that people really become a vampire for. And so they're trying to kind of revamp the whole, not really a class, but the whole vampirism system so that it feels like when you become a vampire, you can do all these different things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. a lot more as far as they changed the animation. So when you bite somebody, you're actually interacting with that NPC instead of, the old animation was kind of, you stood far away from them and this really weird column of blood just kind of went from them to you. Right. It was gory. Yeah. It was gory, but it was kind of, well, that's weird. How did you teleport that blood from one place to another?
How does that work? Yeah, exactly.
That's one long straw you got there, So this is more of a like sneak up behind somebody and then jump on them and bite their neck, like you would kind of think you would see with a vampire.
Right.
And I guess there was originally some challenges with having an NPC interact with a player character animation wise. That's why they kind of landed where they did originally. So I mean, yeah, I think with the whole focus on kind of the vampires being the antagonists of this story, they the opportunity to make it a much more interesting way to play that type of character.
Yeah, I am looking forward to just the whole, like when I first saw the reveal trailer, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. So much yes in this. It's to kind of roll it back to D&D, it kind of has a Ravenloft kind of feel to it. Then it is different than that, and I love going back to, see Skyrim, different than it is, we're used to Skyrim, and then of course the whole vampire thing. So yeah, I'm just so excited to actually jump into this when it launches. And how much did you get to play it before you could actually talk about it? Because like you said, now since it's launch days is almost here, there's really not much we don't know about it. But did you know a lot that you couldn't say?
Well, there was a couple different times. So when they did the reveal in Vegas, they had actually sent us a bunch of information prior to that so that we could have our stuff written up, and then we could, because the embargo lasted up until the end of the reveal show. So it gave us kind of a lot of heads up so that we could get our columns written for the reveal and then release them right as the reveal was ending. Yeah. Which was nice because I'm sitting at the airport waiting to fly to Vegas, looking through all this new information going, oh my gosh, people are just going to flip when they see this. That was actually a lot of fun. And just knowing that I was just one of a handful of people that was seeing this information before anybody else was it was a fun feeling. I won't lie to you. and I'm not one of those people that's really upset about being spoiled about stuff. So it was interesting to have the data in front of me, the information in front of me, and then to see how they presented it at the reveal, how they kind of marketed it and played it up and stuff like that. That was fun. So that is kind of how that worked. With the actual preview build that we got to do that they sent to a bunch of press people, the first thing we did was they had 2 or 3 information sessions with Rich Lambert, the creative director, where everybody kind of dialed in, quote unquote dialed in. It was like a Skype type of thing. And he went through a presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation about here are the new features. And now here, go ahead and play on the server. I think, I'm trying to remember now how they did it. I think they allowed us to record up to 10 minutes of video to release at the embargo time and stream. I think we had to wait till a certain date to start streaming. I don't stream anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me. But they gave us a week to play on the preview server, and then the embargo on that information was lifted a certain day for all press. I think it was maybe a week. I think it was after our week of playing on the server, which was awesome because in previous years, it lifted the embargo on information like 2 days before the thing released. Which kind of makes sense. I mean, from their perspective, I think it kind of makes sense to have that information lifted not too long before the actual release. It makes it hard on us because in the meantime, they're having all kinds of dev conversations and streams and things like that where they're slowly revealing the information along the way so that by the time my column comes out, everybody already knows.
Right. It's like, well, why are you writing about this? I already know about this. I mean,
right.
Tell me something I don't know. That's what you're here for, right?
I was very appreciative that they kind of blitzed it with the press this time instead of revealing it themselves and then allowing us to go out and release our stuff, because I think it's more effective not only for us to be able to quote unquote reveal this stuff through our site. I think they get a larger reach that way because they have all kinds of streamers and
Right. Oh,
content
definitely.
creators
Yeah.
and YouTubers and all kinds of, and when they all release at the same time on the same day, then it's like, that's all you see for like next 3 days is stuff about Greymoor from all kinds of different outlets. So I feel like that was a better approach, and I hope they continue to do it that way because I think it's more exciting for players too.
Yeah, and I think it kind of builds up, for lack of a better term. I hate the word hype. I don't like it when people say, "Oh, there's so much hype for this game," but it really does kind of build that up because, like you said, you see it everywhere for a couple days. It's like, oh, Massively's writing about it. PC Gamer's got something about it. Oh, this YouTube guy's showing off this cool thing that's coming or whatever, and it's like, this is amazing. I can't wait to play this game.
And really, the cool thing about it is, since I'm not obviously working with all these other outlets, everybody has kind of a little bit different slant on it. So it's not like you read one piece and you're done and you know everything, because maybe this other person over here saw something else that the first person didn't. And that happened when I read other people's stuff. I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I missed that in the preview. You know?
Like, how did I miss that? That's amazing. Yeah. So, but no, your articles that you wrote were great. Just like everything that everybody wrote about it, but definitely excited about ESO, and we'll definitely have to find you in game. I don't think we played ESO together yet, have we?
We did a long time ago.
Oh, we did. Yeah, a long time ago when I first started playing. You're right.
You first started. I actually still have a couple screenshots. And the character that I played at that time, stopped playing her and made her my crafter. So you're not going to see her out in the world very much anymore.
That's awesome. Well, we will definitely have to play through some of this new content when it comes out. I'm excited. I am waiting with bated breath, as they say, for it. As you know, if you guys listen to this podcast, you know Pine Leaf and I have been talking about it. We're actually going to have our show, which we started in DDO, called Heaven and Hell. We are going to start that again for Skyrim because I'm playing a Necro. And Pine Leaf I forgot what class he's playing. Can't remember now what he's playing, but he's
you rolled a Necromancer?
I did. I love it so much. It is so much fun.
It's a cool class.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's so much fun. So much fun. And I can't wait to have my Necro become a vampire because reasons.
Makes sense.
Exactly. Totally makes sense. So yeah, so I can't wait. So you'll see plenty of gameplay stuff. I'm going to stream it when we play, and then you'll see it on YouTube. You'll hear us talking about it on the podcast. It's going to be fun. But anything else you want to say about ESO or anything else?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm excited too. I think that this is, when I got to interview Rich at the reveal, I asked him, I said, well, was there any consideration of holding off a year? Because I think next year is a major milestone in the release of Skyrim. I don't remember if it's 15 or 20 years.
I think it's
not 15 or 20 years, probably 10 years.
10, I think. Yeah. I think it's
yeah.
10.
And I said, just to hit that anniversary date, because that's kind of what they did with Morrowind. I think they hit that on an anniversary date for TES3. He said, yeah, we talked about it, but it's time. And I think he's right. It's time to hit the rest of Skyrim in this game. And I think it's going to bring in players that haven't considered ESO in the past because they've heard that it's not Skyrim, right? And it's not trying to be.
Yeah, no.
But to have that familiarity, I'll tell you, one of my favorite parts of playing the original game of Skyrim was when I got to Riften, because I spent so much time in Riften in Skyrim. That's where the Thieves Guild is. I think I had a house there.
Me too. Yep.
Kind of see how they envisioned Riften before Riften kind of built up and got big. It was familiar, and yet it was different, kind of like what they're doing with the rest of Skyrim. And I think that's kind of a fun approach to take. And I wonder if people are going to react positively or negatively to that,
Yeah, and like we said before, I think the thing I'm looking most forward to is just seeing what they do with Skyrim differently, though. It's not just going to be, okay, this is just like Skyrim. No, it's not, because it's before the Skyrim we knew.
Right. And I don't think, they've done dragons already, so I don't think they even ancient dragons in this version of Skyrim, which is a big part of TES5.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, this is pretty much all about the vampire. That's the quote unquote big bad we're going after. So the ancient evil, as it were. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do and the stories they weave around it. I'm excited about it.
Be a good time. Be some fan service in there too, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. That is one thing ESO is good about, but they do it very slyly most of the time, though. And it's just
I found one in the prologue quest when I played through the preview. It had something to do with being finally awake.
Nice. Nice. I see ESO. I see what you did. I see what you did there. All right. Well, tell people how they can find you on the internet once again.
Sure. Yeah. I think, most people who interact with me do so through Twitter. It's at Braxwolf, BRAXWOLF. Obviously, I write for massivelyop.com, and the column is called Tamriel Infinium. If you go on the columns and just drop down to Elder Scrolls Online column, that'll bring up a bunch of stuff. Larry is the other one who writes that column, besides me. So it's not all me, but lately it's been mostly me. And if you're interested in the blog and podcast, it's at Braxwolf at braxwolf.wordpress.com.
And I will put links to all of that down in the show notes for this, so you can conveniently just click on them. But we look forward to more Beyond Bass Bites, more of your Massively OP writing, and of course ESO, and seeing you in ESO.
It's great to talk to you again, Drac. It's been way too long, man.
It has. I agree. I was just thinking about that when we were trying to set this up. I'm like, I can't think of the last time we just sat down and podcasted like this and just talked. It's great.
No.
It's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And as I said, we will see you in ESO.